Welcome to Throttle Stop Garage, episode 1. So this is going to be the first episode reviewing the build of my 1966 Volvo Canadian. And I'm going to refer to it as a Canadian because I'm in Canada and that's how they were sold here. It's a 122 or an Amazon if you're in the rest of the world. For those that don't know, Volvo used to build cars that weren't square. I know the new ones aren't, but boy, there was a period of time when all the designers owned was a ruler. But prior to that, they actually designed this nice little bowler hat of a car. At any rate, so I'm going to take you for a quick tour on what I've done, and then we're going to plot some ways forward, and that'll be the conclusion of the episode. Is we're actually going to do, we're going to get down and actually do something other than talk, which is going to be unusual for me. Sorry for the furnace. Welcome to Canada. Okay, so here's the project. It started life again as a bone stock 1.8 liter Volvo Canadian, 1966. That's significant for Volvo nerds only. The rest won't know the difference, but the earlier cars don't have the better rear suspension, which is part of what we're going to talk about here in the next little bit as we wander around. It's reasonably rust-free, with rust in all the usual places. For example, here at the rear window, when the rear window is out, you can see there's a nice dramatic rust hole there. And of course the other side is, and another one here, the other side's perfectly shiny. Anyway, this is mid-project. Again, if you watched the first video, you'll understand why I'm doing that. But I normally wouldn't start project videos, at least I hope I wouldn't start project videos midstream, so I could invite you into the process of actually working this out. So it's been in the garage for almost 5 years now. It's shameful to say that. I've had a lot of things going on that have meant this car hasn't moved on at the pace. One of the biggest hang-ups, of course, is me. It's always good to admit your own the foibles, but it's hard to get these things done when you're going as far as I'm going. If we were only restoring the car, this car would have been done years ago. All right, restoration is difficult at the best of times, but I've done it lots. I've got plenty of experience taking stuff apart. Occasionally it even goes back together. I don't have a lot of experience engineering new cars. It's not what I do in my day job. I don't think many people have that kind of and if you go looking for information on how to make things better, boy, there's a whole lot of interesting information out there. So I wanted to make this car a little bit better. I wanted to make it a little bit more modern. I was impressed at the time with the pro touring scene. I thought this would make a very interesting upgrade in terms of power. So it used to have a very fancy 2-liter engine that I built for it. It now has, nothing. Air. Air powered. So between that and the floorboards, this is the Barney Rubble Express, with the exception that without a suspension, you kind of crash it right away if you try to push it. There were some issues that needed to be dealt with. Everything was fine. All that was supposed to happen in the garage was it was supposed to come in for a quick tidy up and paint. You can see I'd had a battery here that exploded and actually corroded in behind some of the panels. I've actually taken that panel out. One thing led to another. One of the things that I noted, if you lower the cars, is they have a stance that has them sitting up in 4x4 territory. The suspension, once you get it lowered, stops working because you run out of suspension travel. So you basically are sitting on the bump stops, and that's really cool for the kids, but you just saw me at the start. I'm not a kid, so it's not really cool for me. So I wanted suspension travel. I also wanted handling. So everyone says, oh, they handle great. Well, they handle great for 1960. They don't handle great for 2017 or wherever in the future you're watching this. They are atrocious, and I don't want to have any debates down in the comment section about how I'm wrong. I'm not wrong. They're not great. Go drive a modern car if you think they're great. They're not. You can race them effectively if you bind the suspensions up You basically give them spring rates to the moon and throw some giant sway bars on them. There's a lot of really good engineering as to why that happens, and there's a lot of engineering that had to happen to undo that. So you're currently staring at a shortened Corvette C4 front suspension. Now, before everyone gets horrified, those are forged aluminum parts, both the upper and lower control arm as well as the upright. Forged aluminum part, a replaceable wheel bearing over here. It's a sealed unit. It's cheap as chips, people. This seemed like a really good idea at the time. Then the cross member has been modified by me in consultation with some race engineers that help me with parts of the project. You have to get help when you're going this far. If you don't know what you're doing, get help. And don't rely on people on the internet. Please don't do that. Even me, don't trust any of that stuff. Find someone who does this for a living. A race engineer is what they're called, and hire them. Right? They do this kind of every day. Okay, so I'm just going to show you first the insanity that happened at the back end of the car. So there wasn't anything wrong with the back end of the car. And you'll notice this doesn't look right. Anyone, again, who's ever seen the back end of a Volvo 122 will notice that this is not correct. At any rate, what it hides is a Toyota Supra independent rear suspension. So I'm just going to reach in and pluck the sheet metal out. The sheet metal's done. I have to weld it in. I'm going to make an episode on how we do that. I can't make an episode on how I built all of this. It took a while. And it was just in pictures, so we're not going to worry about that. So out it comes. One-handed even. I've never done that one-handed before. Okay. So there we can see there's an entire subframe, right, tubular subframe that's been installed. Hopefully this is all in focus. Right here, and that then hides all the goodness of 8 inches worth of Toyota rear end, which is basically bomb-proof. And lots of gear choices and availability. Came with a limited slip, so that's a good thing, and allows my rear tires to articulate all on their own. Now, in order to get them to do that, I did have to stretch these rear fenders. So those have actually been stretched 3/4 of an inch. No Bondo this job. I hate Bondo. So we're going to try not to use much by way of body filler. We're going to try to do most of this in metal, which is actually it's not any worse than doing it in Bondo. It's just it takes a bit more skill. At any rate, so you can see the rear parcel shelf here, the flames licking up through the paint. That was because that all had to get replaced. I replaced it with original sheet metal sections over here. Actually, funny story, ran into a guy at a car show who came up to me and openly admitted that he was the one who installed the stereo in this car. It was all I could do to... Actually, I'm sure I said something rude. Thanked him for his service and welcomed him to stop hacking through parcel shelves. I basically wanted the seatbelt mounts back, right? These are holes for the seatbelts, and he lovingly cut right through that part of the sheet metal to put horrid 6x9 speakers. The window sits here, people. The window sits in here. There's lots of room for a speaker above that, if need be. At any rate, moving the wheels in, moving those inner fenders in, meant that I had to change the back seat. So that back seat actually that's the original wire. It's waiting for upholstery, obviously. But I have had to change the way the wires work and reform it so it'll fit, but it drops right back in. At some point I'll show you the underside of that subframe. I have to get some lights organized here. Anyways, it all fits in and it's just as tidy as can be. So I try to work that way. It takes a long time, but what are you going to do? Okay, so this subframe up here, that may get some interest. Don't try this at home. And for heaven's sake, don't follow my lead here, people. This is probably not the smartest thing to do to a car. As we walk around, I'm just throwing some light underneath there so we can maybe see what I'm doing as we get going. Take you down under. Okay, so there's a frame. installed underneath the car. You can see there some mounts for putting the suspension pieces on, and true to form for these things, there was rust, not lots, just little bits, and everywhere. Okay, so instead of dealing with it in the normal way, I thought, how am I going to get all of this frame put back on? And we're going to put a great big engine in this car. Not stupid, but it's going to be big enough, and I want it to work well, so I'd like that to function properly. The car originally had a little over 100 horsepower, so adding a few hundred horsepower to it might not be handy for the frame. So we're rebuilding all of that, right? So instead of having a fairly lightweight frame member in here, this is 10 gauge that I had custom bent to the original form, and everyone jacks on this point. There's just an outrigger that comes out to the A-pillar here, and they end up damaging them. So I put one in there that's 10 gauge, so that's the jack point. This is not the jack point. So everyone jacks here because they think, oh, you can't lift a car by this thing. It's Swedish people, you can lift a car by this thing. Okay, so I took all that off and built all those parts, and you can see those are all in. And I'll weld it in right away, because I'm going to remake this entire front end here as a clip, and then we're going to make that out on the bench. We're going to weld it all together, and then we're going to tuck it all back in. Now, for those that are interested, I'm going to have floor mount pedals in this thing. So, in order to have floor mount pedals, you need somewhere for them to go. So that's a little pedal box that I built. Again, all sheet metal, a little embossed section here. That's for the inputs and outputs into the pedals, the reservoirs, and the output lines, hydraulic lines. It was meant to mimic the standard Volvo box. This is the pedal box here, which hangs up on the firewall and basically gets in the way of everything when you retrofit engines into this car, because you've got all the stuff up here, right? Steering is coming out here, and you've got your two master cylinders here, and it just gets in the way. So I'm taking it out and I'm putting them down there. So that works in my mind. And the reason that there's a missing piece here is a lot of the suspension forces actually get transferred over to the stiff part of the car via these reasonably weak parts. And again, this was a car with 100 horsepower and wasn't meant to do anything great or fast. Tough, but and basic, but could be made stronger. So we're going to make it stronger. So we'll do that as we get going along. Okay, so I think that's good enough for the tour of the car. I'd show you where the engine's over here. I'm not going to dig it out of here. And the car normally isn't going to look like this, right? For the most part, the car is going to be covered, as I don't want pits in the glass. We're going to be welding. I don't want the chrome and other things to get damaged. So we're going to put all that back under wraps. And it looks terrible, but it is effective. So it's Kevlar blankets. They're wonderful. Okay, and with that was episode 1, or at least the start part of it.